Good morning. My name is Ronald Mead. I'm the author of the book called Travels with Pinky the Invisible Dragon. Geez, that's a long story because my dad was a British diplomat. So I was born in Switzerland, if you can imagine. And then I lived in Peru and Argentina, in New York, in Washington. I went to school in England and then in university in Germany. And then I went to Canada, university in Canada. Well, of course, I didn't know at the beginning, but I obviously travel a lot. My parents traveled, so maybe that's where I got this wanderlust. I'm not sure, but I never thought I would be an author until later in life when my daughter was born, and I used to read to her at night, and I wondered as I was reading whether I could write a book that would be of interest not only to the child but also to the parent. I was in the investment business, in portfolio management and also venture capital, and then when I retired to the Bahamas, I decided, because I had a daughter, that maybe I would write a book, a children's book. Well, I guess like all kids, love dragons, and my 4-year-old, when I was reading to her at night, she had dragons in her room, and one was called Pinky, and that's where the origin of the name Pinky comes from. It's from my daughter, and they love wizards and dragons. The one thing about when you write a book, most of the children's books are really an adventure, and they usually have good and evil in them. If you think of all children's books, there's good and evil. And at first I started off with 2 wizards that were identical, and one was nice and one was evil. And then I decided, why am I making my wizard evil? Why don't I just make him grumpy? Poor kids, why should you terrify them at night about all these stories that you're reading to them? It doesn't take long to write a book because nowadays you just Google information and you just get everything. When you want to know the culture of a country, what they eat, how they live, how they dress, what endangered animals exist there, all the information is just at your fingertips with Google. So it makes it so much easier than having to run down to a library and looking for books and talking to people. You could just spend a couple of hours on the computer and know as much as you need to know. Pinky, I think I tried to pick countries that Pinky was going to visit, the wizard was going to send her to, that had a very different culture to the ones we live in here, for example, in the Bahamas. And obviously China comes to mind, and because China is so relevant today in the world, then obviously China was a choice. Africa, of course, because of all the animals that exist in Africa, was another one I thought of. And then the Arabian Peninsula, because obviously the whole Middle East and the issues of what's going on in the Middle East makes that an interesting area as well. This book is unusual because it is so big. At first I thought of, actually, there's 18 chapters, and making it into maybe 6 or 7 books inside an enclosure, that you enclose them in a box. And I think it just became a cost factor. Then if I did it that way, where you took each book out and then slipped it back in after you read it, it would become too expensive. So I didn't realize myself when I wrote it that it was going to become so big. And the illustrator, who I found on the internet in England, it took her 4 years to do all these illustrations, which is a very long time. It makes it different. The fact that it is so large distinguishes it from other books, other normal children's books, I think. Illustrations are beautiful. They're almost like paintings. I've framed quite a few of them, and there's 180 of them. My favorite illustration is probably the horse that turns into a unicorn and flies over the volcano. Yeah, the horse turns into a unicorn and then back again into a horse. And I also have swimming pigs from the Exumas. So all told, this book must be about 8 years old. I was 6 or 7 years old. If you notice on the book itself, my daughter appears to be about 4 years old. By the time the book was finished, she was 8. She was excited to be in the book, and she loved it.
Okay.
Yes, in the book, she runs into the forest looking for some geckos that she had, and she slips and hits her head, and when she wakes up, some monkeys are looking at her, and they ask her name, and she can't remember her name. And all through the book, as she meets the wizard and she meets the other animals and other people who all ask her name, she can't remember it. At the very end, when she goes back home where her parents find her, she asks what her name is, and she discovers her name is Sloan. The reason that it's environmental is that she's trying to stop the deforestation and the scaring of the animals and wants to protect their habitat. In the same vein, the wizard sends her out to learn about different cultures. I think that people are afraid of things that they don't know. And I think once you're exposed, and particularly through travel, where you see people, different cultures and how they dress and how they eat and how they speak and how they live, you have a better understanding of the world, and it makes you more appreciative and less fearful. And therefore you can celebrate differences between us rather than just being afraid of the differences. And I think that's really important in today's world, to accept people for who they are as opposed to just being afraid of them and afraid of the differences between us. You learn a lot of new facts when you actually Google various countries and how people live. There are a lot of things, even though I've traveled a lot, that I wasn't aware of. So it's a real learning experience, even for me who's traveled a lot. For people who haven't had the opportunity, either because they don't have the desire, they don't have the means, or they don't have the time, my book allows them to learn quite a few things about the world that they didn't know about. And a lot of people live within a sort of 25-mile radius of where they were born and have no idea what the rest of the world looks like. I hope my family likes the book. They seem to. I've written 4, of which she's illustrated 3 so far. In the second book, Pinky takes her to Life at Key School and makes havoc in the school because he's invisible. So she causes all kinds of problems in Life at Key School. In the third book, Pinky takes her to Mongolia and up Mount Everest in the search for the Yeti, which she doesn't discover, obviously, because I don't think it exists. And in the fourth book, she goes to Brazil, and in that book, she time travels. She arrives in Brazil in the present time, and then she time travels back to the day that Pedro Cabral discovered Brazil in 1500. And then she goes back and forth from the 1500 to the present day. I mean, I try to keep the book entertaining for the child so that they're interested in reading the book, but they also love the illustrations. The animals are wonderful through the book. But it is an educational adventure in the sense that they're learning about endangered animals, they're learning about different cultures, but at the same time, there's wizards, there's dragons, and there's a certain amount of fear. Even though he's grumpy, she's still a bit nervous when she enters the castle that she's going to bump into the grumpy dragon, and he can turn her into a goat if he really gets angry. So she doesn't want to turn into a goat, even though she doesn't know what a goat looks like, until she goes actually to the Arabian Peninsula. There she learns out what a goat looks like. When Sloan goes to the castle and the wizard says, I'm going to send you around the world to learn about different cultures and endangered animals, and you're going to go, he tells her that she's going to go on an invisible dragon. And he whistles, and the dragon comes roaring into the room and bumps her. I think he bumps into her, and he asks her his name, or her name, I should say. And he said, I don't have a name. And she suggests, well, I think I'm going to call you Pinky. I think this book is different from the average children's book, which is usually just an adventure. And therefore, this makes it slightly different. And as I said before at the beginning, it has appeal to the kid, the child, and also to the parent. particularly the parent hasn't traveled. And even though a parent has traveled, as I've traveled, there's still a lot you can learn through this book of their culture and of the endangered animals in the world. And of course, I can keep writing as many books as I want, as long as Pinky, the wizard, can send Pinky and Sloan anywhere around the world, and I can keep doing this as long as I want, and I can just keep adding countries. I decided to write this book, as I said, after reading to Sloan in bed every night. I think reading is really important, particularly today when kids are spending so much time on the internet. And you need to get them off the internet and hopefully reading a book. And I think that these books, as I say, because they're part adventure, part travel, is really beneficial for them as opposed to being on the internet and doing a lot of these video games. You can get it at Indigo, Canada's largest bookstore. You can get it at Dorrance Publishing, at a company out of Pittsburgh. You can get it on a website, and you can get it at Amazon. Pinky with the Invisible Dragon is my favorite book, but I like Cinderella. I thought that was a nice book, I guess because it had a happy ending, and it wasn't too violent. Rapunzel. I'm trying to think of children's books. I certainly would like to thank the illustrator. She's done a fantastic job. They are truly wonderful, wonderful illustrations. She deserves a lot more exposure than, and she deserves to receive awards for her. I think she has in the past. I found her, as I said, on the internet, but she is very, very talented. I wish I could show you the paintings because they're really nice. I'm a big reader. I read a lot of books.
Okay.
I read, I think the most books I read in 1 year was 100 in 1 year. That was when I was in my 20s. And so I really enjoy reading, and I enjoyed reading to Sloan at night. And as I said before, what caused me to write a book was simply that I was really bored reading the books to Sloan and wondered how could I entertain myself every night reading. And then I said, well, if I could learn something as well as when I'm reading the book, as well as she is learning something, then that would be something I'd try to do. So I ended up doing these travel books. I think if you're going to write a book, it's very difficult to get it published and very difficult to become a big seller. And therefore don't fool yourself that it's an easy process. But don't forget that Star Wars was turned down, and so was Harry Potter was turned down. So you just have to stick at it, stick with it, and don't lose your commitment to try to make it successful. You just have to stick at it. It's just one step at a time. Keep at it, and then just hope for the best, because it's rare that books become successful.